My name is Laura Tams and I'm the organiser here at NAHT Cymru, and as I said, we are delighted to be welcoming you to NAHT Cymru's webinar for small and rural schools within Wales. I'll run through a bit of brief housekeeping and then we'll pass over to our chair for this evening. So I'm pleased to confirm that this event is being simultaneously translated into Welsh, and if you wanted to listen in Welsh then please click the Welsh option at the bottom of your screen. We are recording this evening's webinar, so if you would rather have your camera off, we completely understand and we thank you in advance. During this evening's session, there will be an opportunity for you, and we would be delighted to hear from you, our members and councillors, who are of course more than welcome to join in discussions. So please feel free to use that raise your hand function at the bottom of your screen. We appreciate you commenting and sharing on our events, and we are active on Twitter and Facebook. And for this event, we are using the hashtag #FightForSRS. I am delighted this evening to welcome our President, Karina Hansen, who happens to be a leader also of a small and rural school within Swansea, and also to extend a very Welsh warm welcome to Julie Kelly and Graham Frost, who are NEC members from Hampshire and Cumbria, and they've been instrumental in establishing the NAHT's Small and Rural Schools Network. So we welcome them here today and we really value their input, and I'm sure that many of the issues that we face here in Wales will mirror those over the border. So without further ado, I have the greatest pleasure of handing over to Laura Dole, who will do formal introductions and just let you know how this evening is going to work further. Thank you very much. Thank you, Laura.
Thanks, Laura, and can I add a good afternoon to everyone who has joined us this afternoon. I would also like to add my thanks to our National Exec members, Julie and Graham, and who have been absolutely instrumental in setting up the SRS network. We're really pleased to have you with us this afternoon, and we hope that you take part in the event. NAHT has put small and rural schools at the forefront of our campaign agenda, and it is testimony to the hard work and dedication of our members across all nations that these schools, their leadership teams, and most importantly, their learners get the support that they deserve. This is the latest webinar hosted by NAHT Cymru to discuss the specific situation facing our members in Wales. Most of you will be aware that small and rural schools funding stream set up by the Welsh Government and aimed at supporting these schools has just come to an end. We've challenged the Welsh Government on this as to why the relatively small pot of funding, just £2.5 million a year, has ended when the need is as greater as it's ever been. The Education Minister, Jeremy Miles, has responded to our letter outlining that local authority revenue support grants have increased by 9% for 2022-23. He says that it is an LA decision and LAs themselves who are best placed on deciding how that money should be used to support schools, including small and rural schools. LAs, however, tell us that continued COVID pressures and a national commitment to fair pay in the public sector is having a huge impact on local authority finances. So why have we gathered this afternoon? We have invited councillors from all 22 local authorities across Wales to join us to hear firsthand the plight of small and rural schools leaders and to appeal to them to return to their local authorities and support us in putting school funding at the very top of the agenda. This webinar will be recorded, as Laura's already said, and shared with our colleagues to demonstrate the strength of feeling and support our campaign moving forward. With local authority elections just around the corner, just a few weeks away in Wales, it is vital that we ensure that councillors who understandably want our vote know exactly how schools in small and rural communities are managing. Now, we're going to keep this a very informal webinar. Anybody who's ever joined us before will know that we're all speaking amongst friends here. I would like to give our National President, Karina Hansen, the opportunity to come in at this point if she'd like to share any thoughts or views before we open the floor up to any members who would like to give us a first-hand account of what it's like in a small and rural school at the moment. Karina?
Thanks, Laura. I think from my perspective, I'm speaking as I'm not a very small school, but we have our own problems in our setting in terms of being able to fund enough teaching assistants, to be able to fund release time for staff, just to be able to support the learners that we've got in our particular setting. But I do know the problems that many of our colleagues have within more rural and smaller schools, who are really struggling to find any release time for themselves and for their staff to enable themselves to run a school. And I think it's one of the problems that we very often don't hear in terms of how our small schools work. People don't understand the pressure, the workload, and what comes with running a small school. And there will be many of you out there that will know what it's like for yourselves. You've often got a teaching commitment. The work that you have to do is exactly the same as any other school in terms of needing to develop your curriculum at the moment, the workload that you've got, the cover you're trying to give in terms of COVID. All of these issues add to the problems that you've got. And we were really privileged to hear from a couple of our colleagues in Pembrokeshire who spoke amazingly for us at our recent manifesto release. And they talked about how well they used their small and rural schools grant, that they'd done school to school work where they've been working along on their curriculum together. And that grant allowed them to have some very precious time out of their teaching commitment week to work as a cluster of schools. And in my mind, the work that they're doing is second to none. It's exactly what is at the heart of our new curriculum. We've shared that with the Minister. And it's those sorts of stories, really important stories, and those are the sorts of things that we need to gather to give as evidence from you, our members, to strengthen the call for funding to be returned, and maybe not just returned, but I think perhaps increased as well, because the work that you do as small schools is often at the heart of the community. It's often, you know, it's exactly what's on the agenda at the moment. If we're talking about how do we keep these communities together, well, the first place we ought to be looking is at our small and rural schools, because you are the ones that often keep your communities together. So from you, this is what we need to hear, those real stories, because very, very often, and Laura is the one who speaks to the Minister a lot, we get to speak to the Minister, but quite often what we hear is, give us examples, tell us what the stories are, because I don't know if they're hearing those stories. I don't know if they're hearing what amazing work our small schools do. So I think this is our opportunity really to gather that information and to strengthen the voice and put that forward to Welsh Government and the Minister in particular.
Thank you, Karina. I have a couple of hands up and I'd like to bring in Councillor Phil Bevan from the Caerphilly Borough, if I can. Thank you, Councillor Bevan.
Thank you for the invite, and I'm looking forward to the information that that comes out of the meeting. The one thing I wanted to know was the distribution of this money. I know we have 4 small primary schools in Caerphilly, and they had 26,756 each. I'm just wondering how that 2.5 million was allocated, and how many small schools are there in Wales, and was it divided equally, or, I mean, say Powys like that would have a lot of small schools, I expect. So I was just wondering how it was distributed, and that's all I need to know. That's I'll be listening in or chipping in if I see something that I don't agree with.
Thank you, Councillor Bevan. And as if by magic, we have a Councillor Jackie Charlton next, who I understand is from Powys.
Yes.
And then you mentioned Powys that, so that was.
I didn't know that. I didn't know that.
Laura, my understanding of the 2.2 allocation is that these went. Karina, can you come in? Was this equally to local authorities to distribute?
No, I don't think so. I think people bid for some of it. I think will have been allocated to those schools that are small and rural within the local authorities. But there was also a pot of money that local authorities could bid for. So it was you put together a plan, or the local authority supported you with a group of small schools to put together a plan, and that bid was put into Welsh Government on an annual basis.
Councillor Charlton, would you like to come in? Thank you.
Oh, I'd love to come in. Thank you so much. I mean, everything you've said so far since I've been in here in the last 10 minutes is exactly what we're trying to say here in Powys. I mean, I represent a small rural community of Llangatock, which is linked to Crickhowell, and many of you will know Crickhowell, which is linked to Llanbedr, which is a school which has now it's got a threat of closure now. It's gone through all the consultation. And our argument is that the consultations for these school closures that have taken place in Powys, because there have been quite a number, and there's a lot of political fight back, if you like, from different parties as well, is the fact that we're now hearing that schools, small rural schools, can't deliver the new Welsh curriculum, which is not what I'm hearing on the ground. In the school that I'm a governor of, which is Llangatock School, which is a small school, just over 100 pupils. From what we hear from our ruling group at the moment, it's far too small to run the curriculum. So we are all under threat of closure, and there's many schools in Powys that are under threat of closure. The stories that I'm hearing, and thank you for raising the issue of cluster schools, because those cluster schools, which includes Llanbedr School, which is meant to be closing, have worked incredibly well at delivering the new Welsh curriculum, and they've actually been pioneer schools, so they've been delivering it for the last 12 months now, and I can't tell you how happy they are. There are stresses, there are strains, of course, exactly as you say, that that you've got teachers who are running quite a lot of different things across different classes because of the size of the school, but it's actually working really well. And tomorrow I've got the opportunity to go in for an hour and see how it's working for the children too, so I can have some feedback there. But it's really worrying me that what's happening with the school closures. Llanbedr School, they did the consultation through COVID. They had a strong consultation with the children, and the feedback was, yes, it was emotional, but you would expect that from 5 to 10-year-olds. You would expect some emotional feedback. The feedback they gave, I thought, was extremely well put. They actually delivered a film which wasn't allowed to be delivered publicly at the cabinet meeting for, they say, purposes of protection of the children. But the children wanted that film. Sorry, the children actually wanted that film to be shared, because in that film it explained why these children felt that their school should stay open for all the reasons that you gave earlier. It is strong in the community, it provides community force. There's another school, which is Dulai School, you probably know about that one. Those two schools are now going for a judicial review. This is ridiculous. It's a ridiculous way to deliver school closures, and I think all of us understand that politically, educationally, financially, sometimes schools do need to close, but these schools do not want to close. And I really can't express in words how disappointing it is for those communities. I really can't express it, and that doesn't seem to be part of the mix. And I will put another element in. Llanbedr School, there's a table of schools. I think there's 70 schools in Powys. It might be less than that now. I forget the exact figure. But Llanbedr School is not the most expensive school. It is around middle of the table. So it's an average cost to each child. And yet they're closing it on the basis of cost, and they're closing it on the basis of that they cannot deliver the new curriculum. And both of those things I can't see in the consultation where they've provided the evidence for that, and yet they're still closing it. So, I mean, I don't think anybody's got any answers. I'm just sharing the story. But there are two other schools in this cluster now which are also under threat of closure, and that's my school, which is Llangatock School, and the ward that I could be taking over in the elections because they're merging, it's Llanbedr School. They're both, one's just over 100 pupils, the other one is about 120 pupils. In Powys, that's not a small school.
No.
Thank you, Councillor. And I think that it's very apparent how passionate and how, as a community leader, as you councillors are on the forefront of this, how passionate and how much your voice really does echo those around you, and how important that is. So thank you for sharing, and thank you for attending this evening. I'm going to pass to Laura Dole now, Director at NAHT Cymru, if I can, please.
Yeah, thanks, Laura, and thank you to the two councillors that have joined us so far this evening. I think it's really important that we hear from their perspective. I think for us, and something that certainly resonates for me when I'm having my discussions with Welsh Government around their vision for education, and very much the focus on community schools, in fact, that being a key manifesto pledge and part of the Welsh Labour Government's programme for government, how vital schools are in the community, yet we don't seem to see that kind of thinking when it comes to tackling the really difficult issues like school funding. School funding and the issues around it are not new. You know, this is something that anybody in education has been discussing for decades. The Welsh Government, the Children and Young Persons Education Committee in 2019 commissioned a report by the independent economist Luke Sabieta to look at school funding. A year later, a report came out that told us largely what we already knew. School funding is variable, depending on which local authority. It's very difficult to calculate, and something needs to be done to address the inequity in the system. That report has been sat on. Nobody seems to have done anything with it. Yes, of course, we appreciate that it is a very difficult situation. However, we are failing our learners unless we get to grips with this issue. And if things like flagship manifesto commitments on community schools are to succeed, we need to see some action on the ground in supporting those schools, and supporting those schools with things that you say, as their school leaders, they need to thrive. I completely take on board the point that Jackie made around, you know, this notion that small schools can't, cannot keep up with the rigours of the new curriculum. In fact, the only evidence I've seen is in the exact opposite. That those small schools have worked collaboratively with colleagues within their own local authority area and elsewhere, and gone out of their way to look at how they can bring the skills that they need to support their learners, bringing in their own unique perspective, which is what the new curriculum is about, developing a curriculum that supports the needs of your learners in your community. And to see that, you know, that is, if it is being used as a reason why to close these schools, I think that is that we absolutely need to challenge that, because there is absolutely no evidence to suggest that that is the case. Yes, I'm sure those schools need some support, and that's what that's what we're calling for. Our members on this call are not asking for handouts. They're not asking for a favour. They're asking for a fair crack at what is a really difficult, stressful, but really rewarding job. You don't go into leadership in small schools thinking it's going to be an easy ride. They know the challenges that face them, but all they want is the support to be able to do the job properly and to serve the community well and serve their learners well. So I think it's really interesting to hear from, I can see a couple of comments in the chat, any of our members of small and rural schools, just to give us a little bit of an insight into, you know, what it's like at a small and rural school at the moment with the withdrawal of this grant, and, you know, what does the future hold for you in the next year, knowing full well the challenges that our small and rural schools face around ALN implementation, the new curriculum, and of course the ongoing impact of COVID.
And if I could just come back in there, I mean, I'm very close to Kirsty Williams. I'm in the same party. I'm chair of the local party. I know Kirsty really well. She set up the Education Act to enable small rural schools to stay open. And it's there, it's written in the Act, and it just appears that they've ridden roughshod over what is in the Act. And it's really, really disappointing. And I can tell you it's in writing, it's in print, that the portfolio holder for education said that any school under, I think he actually gave a number of 150. Any school under 150 cannot deliver the educational needs of the children in that school with the new curriculum. It's in writing, it's in the newspaper, it's everywhere. And we've asked for the evidence for that. And of course, they can't come up with it. If somebody could provide us with some evidence, that would be fantastic. Anyway, I'm going to shut up now because there are other.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you. Can I bring in Gaynor Purcell, who's been waiting ever so patiently? So thank you so much, Gaynor.
Thank you. Thanks so much. I just wanted to say I'm a head teacher of a small school of 92 pupils. The school is actually in its 345th year now. It's been around for a very, very long time. I have used that grant in order to train TAs, a TA who came to me basically as a volunteer to start off with. I was able to train her. I was able to put her through forest school. I have a 50% teaching commitment as well as head teacher. I'm admin for 2 days. I don't have full-time admin. I don't have a caretaker anymore. And to me, this grant has made such a difference because it's allowed me to have time to spend with the children. It's allowed me to have time to concentrate on obviously the new curriculum, but it's allowed us to be innovative with what we've got and how we've worked our curriculum around the children's needs. And to me, that is the most important thing. I don't want to sound like I'm moaning and groaning. I love my job. It is the best job in the world. It's amazing. But I know that being a head teacher in a small school is a lot different.
Thank you, Gaynor. Thank you so much. Is there anybody else who would like to come in? I can see we do have some comments in the chat function. I'm not sure if Sarah or anyone else wanted to come in. Oh, Richard, Richard Edwards, we have her hand up. Thank you, Richard.
Yeah, and thank you to all the colleagues that have spoken so far. And I just like to, commend you for what an amazing job you're all doing in difficult times. I'm a head of a small school myself, and I know how incredibly difficult it is and how passionate we all feel about the job and the things that we've done to keep our schools open during these difficult times. One thing that glaringly stands out to me is it shouldn't be a grant. It's massively underfunding and not representing children from rural communities. And the message that we're actually giving out is if you are born in a rural community, then your value to education or your pathway to education is somehow not the same as other children. And I think, as a community, which is predominantly rural in a country that we live in, that message is, it doesn't fit with all the core purposes that we're trying to create. It doesn't fit with the new curriculum. It doesn't fit with anything of the educational changes that we're actually putting in place within Wales. And that's the message that you're really giving out to children in a rural community is you're actually not as important or you don't have the same value as children who live in city schools. And I know we all go above and beyond from what we're doing at the moment in our schools. I've been a caretaker this week. I've been a breakfast club. I've been a TA. I've covered lunchtime supervision. We're often talked about how are you looking after the well-being of your pupils and staff and so on and so forth. We've had a horrendous time with staff being hospitalised during COVID. The challenges that we faced have been horrendous, but we've come through it and we've minimised school closures. I have to say that my local authority has been very, very supportive and we've got a very good relationship towards it. But I think that message is what we're actually giving out. Is that a right message to give to children for the future as well within Wales? And I think that is something that we're in danger of actually alienating a lot of children from rural backgrounds through no fault of their own. And I feel really passionate about it that children from our communities are so good. They give above and beyond. They're committed. They're so well behaved. They try everything. And yet we are the new curriculum because we can align our school to the progression steps. We could make the new curriculum be better than most schools. And yet that funding is tied to a grant and it comes with set criteria that you've got to do it for. And actually it shouldn't be a grant. It should just be a given that schools should have that money right from the very start.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you. I'm going to bring in Councillor Jane Gabby from Bridgend if I can. Welcome, Councillor Gabby, and thank you.
See, first one of the day and I can't even get myself off mute. Thank you very much. Yes, I am a councillor from Bridgend. but I'm also a trade union rep as well, which both Lauras know very, very well. I won't apologise for that, but I think what it's given me, I'm also chair of governors of a primary school as well, just for everybody to know. I think it's really important that we support our small schools. I've actively campaigned against the shutting of smaller schools in Neath Port Talbot, and was really, really disappointed when I saw the outcome of the consultation. Part of the reason I was disappointed about the outcome of the consultation, and I don't think Welsh Government have picked up on this at all, is because we're supposed to be having a carbon neutral agenda. We can't even give our kids safe walking routes to school. And I have a real big problem with that. How can we expect someone who's 5 or 6 to walk 3 miles to their nearest school? That doesn't even make sense to me. It certainly wouldn't have happened when I was little, and I know I'm grey now, but that's irrespective. There's also something to be said about the way funding our schools happens in local authorities, and I have a problem with the way they divvy up the funding. The funding that's identified in consequentials that comes from Welsh Government, they don't give it all to schools. They keep some of it back. I appreciate they have to fund back office functions. I appreciate that we have policies and HR that they need to fund, but it doesn't seem to be a fair shout. And I wonder how much of it actually goes to supporting our support services that we can't actually get in our schools. So all those children that we need to assist because they have additional learning needs, we certainly haven't got the funding for it. And with the new legislation that's come into place, we certainly haven't got hope in hell of actually managing the demand for our service provision. So, you know, sorry, I just felt I needed to chip in a little bit. Thank you very much.
And thank you, Jane. Yes, always welcome. And I think you touched on there another important issue that NAHT Cymru is lobbying, and that is for the consortia. And you did touch on this, the way that schools are funded, and that is a huge chunk. And NAHT Cymru have lobbied hard to look at that. And those amongst us may be aware of the report that was commissioned and that came out. If you haven't seen that, I'll pop that in the chat. I'd like to bring Karina Hansen in now, please. Thank you, Karina.
Thanks. I'm just going to follow up on a point that was just raised there about additional learning needs. And very often in our small schools, we attract children with additional learning needs because we're small schools for that very reason, because the families will choose to bring their children to our schools because they feel that is where their children are more comfortable. So it actually makes no sense to be talking about the fact that we can't provide for those children, because we do. That's what we do, and we do it really, really well. And just I think there's a really important point that I think it was the councillor from Powys brought up there. That's not something I've read, and it's really interesting to pick up that point around the 150 figure, not being able to deliver the curriculum. I think we need to really push for the evidence on that, because I certainly don't believe that's true at all. I think a lot of our small schools have got a fantastic context around which to build their curriculum. You know, I'd be horrified to think that I can't deliver a curriculum in my community. I think I've got so much within the community to offer the children that come from that community that is absolutely the right context for those children, because it's where they come from, it's where their families have come from, and generations have as well. Yeah, I find that quite an insult. So I really think that's something we need to follow up and ask for the evidence of that. I do know a couple of people in the chat, Laura, were the ones that gave us the input at our conference, and perhaps it'd be really interesting to hear from one of them, because they gave a really good presentation, and just the way they spoke about what they've done together. It would be lovely to hear from them if they're here.
Yeah, Sarah and Catherine, I'm not sure if one of you would like to come in.
Yeah, I don't mind making a start if that's okay, and then I'm sure Catherine will join in with me. When we spoke previously, we started off with the positives of working in a small school, which I think a lot of people have already said. We feel that, you know, relationships are strong between pupils, parents, There's a family feel to a small school. In my school in particular, I'm now teaching the children that I've taught. We know our families incredibly well as a result of that. The children and the staff are really happy. The ethos is tangible. You can bring the whole school along with you really quickly. So it means we're able to be strategic and make changes relatively quickly as well. Collaboration in the community is strong. We've developed a small and rural schools network within Pembrokeshire so that we can all support each other. We've also created a triad of schools, which has allowed us to become more strategic. We've developed our leadership, not only of us as head teachers, but also about other staff members who've taken the lead across 3 schools for specific areas. And that's only been possible with the Small and Rural Schools grant. And we feel we've been quite innovative in our approach to the new curriculum. The ALM pupils, we feel, often make marked progress in a small school setting. It seems to suit them. We often have children who've moved from big schools with behavioural issues to us in a small school. The ethos of attachment, emotion coaching, the focus on relationships is enough to change their behaviour and allow them to actually access a curriculum and learn. I would say we're extremely lucky with the staff we have in small schools, in ours in particular. They work above and beyond as they feel part of things, they feel valued. They remain in post, which allows for consistency. And we become specialists in many areas, sometimes by default, but it allows for the career development for all of the staff. And as already been said, small schools are at the heart of the community. Pupils being able to walk to school, we're quite lucky that within my village, they haven't got to walk as far, allows them to become involved in the community. Parents feel they're involved with their child's education. Families are not isolated further with rural deprivation and lack of facilities. We've got after school clubs, for example, and I know we will all be running breakfast clubs. We allow pupils and their families to keep a rural identity. And I'm in a church school, so especially we've got strong links with the church. Values are at the centre of small schools, I think, and that is a strength. And, you know, this becomes evident with all the pupil tracking that we do within our schools. And the secondary schools often identify pupils who've attended small and rural schools as performing well and being successful in further education. I don't know, Catherine, do you want to say about our challenges?
Yeah, I had the lucky draw, didn't I, Sarah? To
yeah.
I mean, what we were saying when we spoke to the conference before was, you know, how much we enjoy our job. You know, it's not. There's so many schools where small schools are seen as a step up to the bigger school. I mean, I think in Pembrokeshire certainly we've got a huge network of people who are just committed to what they're doing, and that's, you know, that's what they want to do. But there are many challenges and they need to be known, I suppose. So we said, like the lady said earlier on, you know, the expectation of workload is exactly the same for the non-teaching head with a senior leadership team. We've got the same amount of things to do, but we haven't got the bodies to support us with it. Work-life balance very often seems impossible to maintain. Our teaching commitment is high. It can be up to 0.8, if not more. And then, like this week, one of my members of staff is off with COVID, long COVID. The supply teacher's off with COVID. The HLTA that was going to cover her is off with COVID. So in my management time, I'm now teaching the other class before I go to teach my class. So, you know, it's just a rolling thing. Staff absences then is that we are all of these, and we have been for the last 2-3 years: breakfast club, lunchtime supervisor, cleaner, caretaker, as well as the teacher and the head teacher. Meetings, we're often called to meetings and it swamps our calendar, which then takes our precious management time away because we have to attend meetings. The pay gap is closing for us as small school heads. A teacher on a UPS 3 is almost earning the same as us, and then asking for a TLR on top. There are deputy head roles locally where there's no teaching and they're much higher salaries. So it doesn't help sustain the consistency of head teachers and management staff in small schools, if that's the pull. Admin support is limited, like the lady said before. Often we have the big jobs as well. We have the ALNCO jobs that in another school might go to somebody who's getting another day a week out of the class or whatever to do. In my school, I've got 40% ALN in a school of 72. Just like the lady said just now, you know, they're coming to us, they're choosing to come to us, and then we're having that positive effect. So we have more children, which is fine, but I'll talk to the school down the road with 300 on roll. They've got 1 statemented child and I've got 5. So as an ALNCO then, I'm then doing all of those meetings, and then you've got the ALN transformation on top. Resources and space, continual battle to have sufficient and properly maintained buildings, budget restraints, impacts on training. PDG takes ages to catch up. So you might have a year where you have 2 or 3, and that's the year they judge your PDG grant. And then you might have 15 the next year, and it takes a long time to catch up. Due to the rural nature, although we have a very dedicated staff, sometimes it's difficult to attract them because we're rural. And then being part of a big school cluster is a huge thing, because they've just got no understanding of what pressures we're under, and then place further demands on us to say you need to join in with what we're doing as a cluster. And then there's that constant concern, as the councillor was saying earlier, that will be closed. And then COVID heightened all of these, all of the above. But then I don't know if you want me to go on, Laura or Sarah, I don't know. We then tried to think, you know, solutions when we were speaking. And the use of the Small and Rural Schools grant has been the only way we've been able to afford to do what we've done. So we've built up, Sarah and myself and another head teacher, we've built up a triad, and it's impacted positively on absolutely everybody. And when the minister said that he gave the grant, you know, not just to help head teachers not to teach, you know, our answer to that was, well, there was 2.5 million funding made, and it was to encourage innovation and to support school working. And that's exactly what we've used it for. And we're being held up as a real success for that. So we, as a triad, we've been very innovative, and we've been recognised as that. We initially supported one another with management issues. So to improve leadership through the development of a strategic and focused monitoring cycle. So it wasn't just our opinion for each teacher. So work scrutiny, lesson observation, standardisation. So just like a big school, we created our own bigger school, really, of staff across. So school to school support for staff, encompassed monitoring, sharing best practice, a shared network on the hub, shared training, so that we can afford to get the really good, popular, you know, innovative trainers. We only have to pay a third, if not more, if not less, because we invite other schools to pay. We've used the grant to have teachers work as professional learning communities, built capacity for the ALN transformation, working together. Individual head teachers now, us 3, are being asked to support other schools in improvement and in innovation. And there are a huge amount of examples we could give of what we've used that grant for. So it's not just to release us from a teaching commitment. That's a really kind of sad thing to hear people say. You know, it's allowed us to be on an equivalent sort of footing to bigger schools. And when, like the lady was just saying about, you know, safe routes to school, local school next to me has got over £1 million for safe routes, including £160,000 for a scooter track. And we don't qualify, even though my children have got no pavement to walk to school, because we're in a village area. So you're back to equity and equality. You know, what's the plan with the grants? And it's just madness. And it's such a small amount when you look at everything else. So I'm in. Whatever we do, Sarah, Kate and I, we're in.
Thank you so much, ladies, and it's really inspiring, and it shows that how successfully collaboration within these networks can work. I'd like to bring back in Councillor Bevan if I can. Thank you.
Federation and working together does work. I'm still struggling with how this money is distributed. The union lady said that she felt that some authorities were not passing on all the grant. With Caerphilly, we had 107,000. And it was divided amongst 4 schools, and I've done the maths, and all that money came to us. Now, I'm sure the authority have said that it was only 107,000 they had, but I just want to know, how many small, as a union, do you know how many small schools there are in Wales, and how was the money distributed? Because our schools had 26,000. What does other schools had? Surely the distribution of the funding has to be fair. And I don't understand whether it is or not in the moment. Somebody can explain that, and then I'll continue to listen.
I think what happened was the local authorities would have put a bid in for the grant, and then that will have been split. So you can see people have put different figures down in the chat. So I imagine it is because you've got different numbers of small schools gaining from that grant within each local authority. So my school, for example, we had about 18,000, but I can see Pembrokeshire schools had 10, probably more Pembrokeshire schools sharing the equal allocation of the grant to that local authority. So who knows? Funding is enormously complex. So it's probably not that when we applied for the grant, that each local authority got the same amount, because they seem to weight things with, all sorts of other measures before a grant is allocated. So it's a really good question, but I don't think it's an easy question to answer, because it would be like me saying to you, well, how's your school funded compared to another local authority? Well, my school could be at the same size, have the same number of ALN, have the same number of free school meals in the school, and I might be funded more than that school. Equally, I could be funded £600 less. So that is how the complexity of funding in Wales at the moment is, because the money goes through consortia, and each consortia shares their money differently, and then you've got the money that goes to the local authorities, and every local authority has got its own way of sharing that formula. So it's almost impossible to have those discussions around gaining a budget share, and it's something we're bringing up with Welsh Government at the moment, is that there needs to be transparency, there needs to be clarity around how formulas are come to within each local authority, because as a small school, as any school, how can we have the conversation around what is equitable without that knowledge? And I'm afraid it's not there.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I just saw a flash came through there where one authority had £15,000 for 3 schools, and I've got 4 schools on 26,000.
Yeah,
where it's like a funding lottery.
Yeah, absolutely.
There must be some consistency.
Right. Yes.
In regards to the small and rural school grant, Councillor, then that was down to local authorities to bid to Welsh Government for part of the 2 million. So again, the inconsistencies there. Some local authorities would have asked for more, maybe been granted more. So yeah, it's very inconsistent and unfair.
Councillor Jackie's got a good idea there on track. So I thought.
Laura, thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Just to come in on the issue of school funding, and I think now we're starting to demonstrate the complexities of this, and how difficult it is to even have a conversation amongst school leaders who, let's face it, are the experts in the field. We've got local authority representatives in the form of councillors on the call who are struggling as we are to work out school funding and how it comes into being. And I think that just is testimony to the fact that actually, if people in the sector and local authorities don't fully understand the picture, and we don't, something's wrong, and something needs to be done to look at this. And school funding has been and continues to be a key campaign objective of NAHT. We continue to push the Welsh Government to deliver on the recommendations of the Luke Sabieta report, which I mentioned earlier was a government commissioned report, to look at school funding, to tackle the issues of inequity across the system, and to really get to the heart of some of these problems. Because unfortunately, unless we really get to grips with school funding, all the other things, the ambitious reform agenda, is always going to stall, because you've got this fundamentally flawed system of how funding is delivered in schools. which is why we want to have this conversation with the elected colleagues that have joined us this evening. Why, as a union, we continue to push this at all levels of government, local and Welsh government. And we are really keen that you take this message back to your local authorities and continue this discussion. And I know I may well be preaching to the converted, because I think a great many of you colleagues on the call have already contacted us about our campaign and would like some further information. Please feel free to contact NAHT Cymru at any time if you would like some further clarity on our campaign objectives, what the issues are in your local authority area. We would be more than happy to team you up with some members and to give you some real life examples of the struggles that schools face as a result of funding. Sorry, Laura, I think it was just really useful to come in on that point, just to kind of set the scene.
Thank you, Laura. Councillor Bevan?
Yeah, just a quick one. As far as I'm concerned, I with Plaid Cymru, so I'll be contacting Sian Gwentlian and explaining that the fact that some schools get 15,000 and others, it depends on who's good on the bidding. It's no good sending money into the authority, as the union lady said, they will milk a bit off. But if you get a direct grant of a known amount for what schools require, then I think that's going to be a better way, isn't it? I'll shut up now again.
Thank you, Councillor.
Stolen my campaigning line, haven't you, Councillor?
And I'm just picking up on something from Julie.
No politics in education, please.
Absolutely not, sorry.
I'm just picking up, Julie. Thank you so much again for joining us. Julie is our an NEC member for NAHT, also a leader of a small and rural school in England. Julie, I'm not sure if you wanted to come in and just comment on what you've actually written in the comments, if that's okay. Thank you.
Thanks very much for asking me tonight. I've just been on a National Association of Small Schools meeting today, and you're saying all the same things. All the small schools across the whole of the UK are saying exactly the same thing. There is, so we put together a small and rural school group for the NAHT. We're trying to get a parliamentary group together. But there was a survey went out in 2019, and we rejigged that, and that's coming back out again soon. So please look out for that. We'd really like your feedback on that, because that's what we're going to take to Parliament as well. So working closely with NAS, which is the National Association of Small Schools, and they've put together a small schools manifesto. I had the new Bishop of Portsmouth came out to my school the other day, and the first thing he did was look at our Christian values and how many children we had, which is 69, and immediately said, you know, is this sustainable? Is this viable? I'm onto a diocese meeting tonight, and then tomorrow I'm on the Diocesan Board of Education for Portsmouth, and already they are reacting to the white paper and academisation. And things that we've seen across the rest of the country in Hallam and Birmingham, where the Catholic diocese were trying to academise schools against their will. This is going to come. The Church of England are watching this. I don't know about Church of Wales. This is the same type of thing that's going to happen with small schools. So apart from all the things that you've just talked about, which is all totally true, and it's ridiculous, we can do a fantastic curriculum, and Ofsted has said that as well, that what we do in small schools, we are then going to be fighting against, are we going to be subsumed into maths, and are we going to be seen financially viable, or tip off the edge? So just to assure you, Graham and I, various other members are doing this, and we'll be supporting you in your motion for this and the grant and the funding of small schools in Wales, because we all feel very passionately about that, and exactly the same problems across, and well done everyone, and please, we will be a voice for you as well nationally. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie, and it's somewhat comforting and reassuring to know that it's not just this side of the border that we see the issues, and of course education being a devolved matter here in Wales. Did you want me to bring Laura or Karina in? I'm conscious of time. We have 9 minutes left until the scheduled end, and I wondered if any further members would like to comment, or if there's anything that we may have missed this evening that you think is vital for our discussions to continue, or if any councillors who have yet to speak would like to come in and really open the forum. I've got Tim Newbold. Thank you, Tim.
Just trying to put my video on. or maybe I shouldn't, but there we go. Yeah, I've just been beavering away at one of the questions that the councillor asked before, just trying to find out actually how many small schools there are in Wales. The definition of a small school in the Education Order of 2014 is that a school with fewer than 91 pupils is designated a small school. So that might be an interesting piece of information in POIS. I can't find exactly, I can't find at all how many small schools there are in Wales. I've been Googling and skim reading lots of different reports, but I can't find the answer to that question, I'm afraid, at the moment.
Thank you, Tim. And yeah, I'm also struggling, so I feel your pain. But the definition is very welcome. Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to come in? Jane Gabby, thank you.
Thanks, Laura. Thank you very much. It's been really interesting listening to some of your head teachers this evening. I think the other point that I'd like to raise with you is about recruitment of staff, whether that's head teachers, whether that's teachers in school, whether that's teaching support staff, catering staff, any support staff, because I don't know about anybody else, other councillors on the call or other heads on the call. We had real difficulty when I was interviewing for my school the other day. We had real difficulty appointing to all the positions that we had open, and we certainly can't get any agency staff at the minute. Not that I like using agency staff for obvious reasons, but the reality is they're quite often a useful amenity to have. And the sustainability of our education really in Wales.
Yeah, thank you, Jane. Would anybody else like to come in at this point? If not,
I didn't have a chance to get my hand up. The one thing I'm very much involved, although I don't speak Welsh, with Welsh medium education, and shortage of Welsh medium teachers is an issue that's throughout Wales. And of course, it's an expanding industry because so many parents want to give their children that which they never had in schools, and it is growing and it is causing a problem. You just sometimes have to take somebody on who's not quite, wouldn't have passed the test, but you take them on and you try and train them up yourself. And it's been fairly successful in the comprehensive that I'm chair of. So it does work, but it's a struggle to get qualified teachers.
It is absolutely, and I think the pandemic has certainly highlighted that. I know our members have had issues in their settings. Would anyone else like to come in, or we can bring it to a natural close? Laura or Karina, would you like to say anything just to end the meeting?
I was just wondering how you're going to end this. What are we going to do? We've all met together here. We have a common purpose. Are we going to put something together in words and throw Karina in the deep end and get her to chase it, or what?
Well, funny enough, I was just gonna come in with a next steps conversation. So thanks for focusing our attention on this. I think it's become apparent throughout this conversation and to the subsequent previous meeting, should I say, that we've had with Welsh Government and local authorities, that unless we start to shout really, really loudly on the issue of school funding, things are not going to change. We cannot sit back and allow our school leaders, our teachers, our support staff, who do a vital role in our communities, to not be supported when it comes to small and rural schools. As I've said before, as Karina has already mentioned, small and rural schools is at the heart of our campaign agenda, along with school funding. And I think a good idea for a next step, as far as NAHT is concerned, is that we would continue to have the dialogue, obviously, with Welsh Government, but considering that we are in the run-up to an election period, I think now's the time to focus our attention on those candidates running for election and those people who will be elected come the first week of May, who will be making those decisions when it comes to school funding. It's been made abundantly clear by the Education Minister that school funding and those decisions are made at a local authority level. And if that is the case, that's where we need to focus our attentions. I will meet with our colleagues from across Wales, and Karina, who chairs our Welsh Executive Committee, I'm sure will put this forward at our next committee meeting to ensure that we put together a dossier of information that we can send out to candidates ahead of the election, so that we've actually got something to hold them to account to. And we would welcome any councillors, the ones on this call, if they're successfully elected, to come back to us and have that conversation with us directly about what needs to happen, what change can you make at a local authority level to make things better for our schools and for our learners. I'll leave it there. Karina, if you wanted to come in on anything.
Yeah, only just to pick up the point around community schools. It's a hot agenda at the moment for Welsh Government, and I think it's something we need to push in terms of the small schools and how they fit into that picture. So, and it is something we keep asking, what is it that Welsh Government think are community schools? That I think they've got a vision, but they're not sharing that vision fully yet. And I think we should be talking about what we feel a community school is in terms of how that works for our small and rural schools. You know, we don't have the same issues, I guess, as England, where schools could be swallowed up by academies or MATs, but we do have the issue of schools being amalgamated or pulled into just large schools, you know, and that I think is an issue and a danger that we can see happening in many areas of Wales, and something we need to be watching out for. And, you know, as local authorities, as councillors, it's got to be something high on people's agenda to protect those communities, surely. And so I think that's something we need to really follow up and campaign on as well.
Okay, so I can come in there quickly, Laura. Unfortunately, after 46 years of continuing unbroken service, I'm standing down. I'm not retiring from council, so I won't be able to help you in May, but I'll certainly push this on as far as I'm concerned, because I have many fingers in many pies that I can now spend more time with.
Thank you, Councillor Bev, and best wishes for the future. Being a Caerphilly girl myself, I know the massive task you've had. So thank you, and yeah, a well deserved. I won't say retirement, because you obviously have plenty of things left to do. So thank you to everybody who's attended this evening. It has really been wonderful to get together and discuss this matter. Please keep an eye on your inboxes, because as Laura and Karina have alluded to, this is just the beginning. So we will be pushing the small and rural school funding, and also the wider school funding issue. So thank you again, and I will say goodbye. Thank you.